Hello everyone. Um, our story for today is all about the Picture of Dorian Gray, a novel by Oscar Wilde. This story tells about the handsome young man named Dorian Gray who becomes the subject of painting by the artist Basil Hallward. Captivated by Dorian's beauty, Basil paints a portrait that captures his youthful essence, influenced by the hedonistic and morally ambiguous Lord Henry Wotton. Dorian wished that he could remain forever young while the portrait ages instead. To his astonishment, Dorian's wish comes true. He leads a life of indulgence and debauchery without any physical consequences. As all signs of his sins and aging are transferred to the portrait, over time, the painting becomes increasingly grotesque, reflecting the corruption of Dorian's soul. Dorian's pursuit of pleasure leads him to ruin the lives of those around him, including Sybil Vane, a young actress who falls in love with him. When Dorian cruelly objects her, she commits suicide. This marks the beginning of Dorian's moral decline and the further degradation of the portrait. Years pass, and Dorian remains outwardly youthful and charming, while the portrait grows more hideous. Eventually, Basil confronts Dorian about the rumors of his corrupt lifestyle. Dorian shows Basil the horrific portrait, and in a fit of rage and panic, murders him. Haunted by his deeds, Dorian tries to reform but finds himself unable to escape his past. In a final act of desperation, he attempts to destroy the portrait, hoping to break the curse. However, in doing so, he inadvertently kills himself. When his servant finds him, Dorian is an old, withered man, and the portrait has reverted to its original form. So, the picture of Dorian Gray is compelling exploration of vanity, moral corruption, and the consequences of living a life detached from ethical responsibility. Wilde's novel remains a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of valuing beauty and pleasure above all. So, the picture of Dorian Gray is compelling exploration of vanity, moral corruption, and the consequences of living a life detached from ethical responsibility. Wilde's novel remains a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of valuing beauty and pleasure above all. The pictures of Dorian Gray, elements of prose. Characters. Dorian Gray. Si Dorian Gray is a handsome young man who wishes to stay young forever. Then si Basil Hallward, ang artist who paints the Dorian's portrait. Then si Lord Henry Wotton, a wealthy man who influences Dorian to pursue a life of pleasure and hedonism. And lastly, Sybil Vane, a young actress who falls in love with Dorian and committed suicide. The setting of the story is it takes place in London during the late 19th century. Key locations include Basil's studio, Dorian's home, and various social setting around the city. Ang plot, ang sa beginning is Basil paints Dorian's portrait. Dorian, influenced by Lord Henry Wotton, wishes that he could remain young while the portrait ages. Then, in the middle, Dorian lives a life of excess and immorality. As he commits more sins, the portrait becomes uglier, reflecting his inner corruption. In the end, Dorian tries to change but can't escape his past. In an attempt to destroy the cursed portrait, he accidentally kills himself. Um, the portrait to its the portrait returns to its original beautiful state, while Dorian's body showed his conflict, internal conflict. Dorian struggles with his conscience and the consequences of his immoral actions. Then external conflict. Dorian's action harms those around him, leading to the tragedies like Sibyl Vane's suicide and Basil's murder. The theme of the story explores of themes of vanity, the superficial nature of beauty, the consequences of living a hedonistic lifestyle, and the moral corruption that comes from pursuing pleasure without regard for ethics. Point of view of the story, the novel is written in a third person, allowing the narrator to provide insight into the thoughts and feelings of multiple characters, especially Dorian. Style. Wilde's writing style is ornate and descriptive, filled with witty dialogue and vivid imagery. His use of irony and paradox highlights the moral ambiguities in the story. Tone of the story. The tone of the novel is often dark and reflective, with moments of satire and critique of society's obsession with youth and beauty. Next story is all about Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. Dr. Faustus, a highly educated scholar, becomes delusioned with traditional forms of knowledge such as theology, medicine, law, and philosophy. Seeking something more profound, he turns to necromancy and decides to summon a demon to gain unlimited knowledge and power. Dr. Faustus conjures Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles is a servant of Lucifer and offers his soul to the devil in exchange for 24 years of service from Mephistopheles and the ability to perform magic. So, Mephistopheles warns Faustus about the consequences of his pact but ultimately agrees to serve him. With his newfound answer, Dr. Faustus indulges into various acts of magic and travels the world, performing impressive feats and entertaining kings and emperors. He summons the spirits of historical figures like Alexander the Great and the Helen of Troy, impressing those around him with his abilities. So, despite of Dr. Faustus' successes, Faustus begins to experience moments of doubt and regret. He is visited by a good angel and an evil angel, representing his conflicting desires for redemption and continued indulgence. As the end of his 24 years approaches, Faustus becomes increasingly fearful of damnation. He considers repenting and seeking forgiveness from God, but his pride and desire for power ultimately prevent him from doing so. On the final night of his pact, Faustus is overcome with terror and despair. He realizes the gravity of his decisions and begs for mercy. But it is too late. As the clock strikes midnight, demons come to claim his soul, and Dr. Faustus is dragged to hell, where he will suffer for all eternity. The tragedy of this Dr. Faustus served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition, pride, the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Faustus' tragic and highlights the consequences of selling one's soul for earthly gains and forsaking moral values in favor of power and pleasure. Dr. Faustus was written by Christopher Marlowe. Tells the story of a scholar named Dr. John Faustus who becomes dissatisfied with the limits of traditional forms of knowledge and decides to practice magic. Characters of the story: Dr. Faustus, a highly educated scholar who turns to necromancy to gain unlimited knowledge and power. Second is Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles is a demon who serves Lucifer and becomes Faustus' servant after Faustus makes a pact with Lucifer. Then si Lucifer is the prince of the devils with whom Faustus make his pact. Si Wagner, Faustus' servant. Then, ang good and evil angel, personification of Faustus' internal struggle between repentance and damnation. Setting of the story: the story takes place in various locations in Europe, including Faustus' study in Wittenberg, Germany, the palaces of various kings and emperors, and sometimes in the supernatural realm. Conflict: internal conflict. Faustus' desire for power and knowledge conflicts with his fear and regret over his pact. Faustus' interaction with Mephistopheles and Lucifer, and his defiance of the natural order through the use of dark magic is the external conflict. The theme of the story reflects the theme of ambition, the limitation of human knowledge, and the consequences of making a deal with the devil for earthly wealth. Point of view: the story is written from a third-person perspective, focusing on Faustus' thoughts and action, and the tone of the story is dark and melancholic, with moments of irony and occasional humor to convey the message of concern about the dangers of ambition and power. And that's all for today. Thank you.